Robert Hansen, the butcher baker, unmasking Alaska's most chilling serial killer. By day, he baked bread and blended in like any ordinary man. But at night, he lured women into his trap, only to release and prey on them in the frozen Alaskan wilderness. On a bleak morning in 1983, a construction worker near Eklutna Road uncovered a shallow grave. What lay inside had been torn apart by animals, time and the elements erasing nearly every trace of who she once was. Investigators gave her a name, Eklutna Annie, a haunting symbol of countless women who vanished without a trace. But no one could have imagined the darkness her discovery would soon expose. She was just one among many, lured, hunted, and dumped by Robert Hansen, a man who turned the frozen Alaskan wild into his personal killing ground. Robert Christian Hansen, born February 15, 1939, in the small town of Estherville, Iowa, seemed destined for a life of quiet anonymity. His early years were defined by isolation and pain. The son of a baker, Hansen grew up painfully shy, struggling with a stutter and severe acne that left scars far deeper than skin, a wound that festered and never fully healed. Rejected, ridiculed, and dismissed, especially by women, his painful childhood left a wound that festered, leading to a future of horror. He was a boy shaped by silence and fear, raised in the long shadow of a father who ruled with intimidation. Hansen escaped into the wilderness, where he could rewrite the rules. In hunting, he found structure, power, and a disturbing foreshadow of what lay ahead. He joined the U.S. Army Reserve in 1957, hoping for stability, but it didn't stick. A year later, he was back in Iowa, working at a police academy and marrying a younger woman. Outwardly, his life seemed stable. Privately, something darker simmered. From the outside, Hansen's world looked predictable, even dull. But lurking under that veneer of normalcy was a growing darkness, one that would violently surface, revealing a twisted mind driven by cold calculation and unthinkable cruelty. Between 1972 and 1983, Robert Hansen abducted, raped, and murdered at least 17 women, most of them vulnerable sex workers or runaways. But Hansen didn't simply kill. He preyed on his victims. He would release them into the dense Alaskan wilderness, then pursue them like wild game. With a Ruger Mini 14 rifle and a deadly arsenal of knives, Hansen turned the remote forests and desolate tundra into his own twisted hunting ground. Only the courage of a fearless teenage girl, Cindy Paulson, combined with relentless law enforcement, finally shattered Hansen's reign of terror. But how did such monstrous evil hide behind an ordinary face? Alaska, in the late 70s and early 80s, was a land of opportunity and lurking danger. The oil boom brought a wave of transient workers, fueling a shadow economy of strip clubs and sex work. For many desperate women, it was a refuge. For Hansen, a creepy hunting ground. His victims were the forgotten, the runaways, dancers, and sex workers who disappeared like shadows in the night. Their screams were lost in the wilderness, their fleeting lives erased by a society that barely noticed. By the late 1970s, the Anchorage police were facing a chilling puzzle. Shallow graves surfaced across south-central Alaska. Women murdered and abandoned in the wild. With no suspects and scarce clues, the cases went cold, while Hansen, the quiet baker with a stutter, slipped through their fingers. the investigation shifted dramatically, propelled by breakthroughs in forensic science, the rise of criminal profiling, and relentless teamwork across agencies. What started as scattered disappearances soon coalesced into a single, horrifying manhunt, the relentless chase for one of America's darkest serial killers. Robert Hansen's violent path didn't start in Alaska's frozen wilderness. It was forged long before, in the quiet shadows of small-town Iowa. At just 21, he burned down a school bus garage in Pocahontas County, an act fueled by years of perceived rejection. Arrested and diagnosed with manic depression, with periodic schizophrenic episodes. The psychiatrist who made the diagnosis noted that Hansen had an infantile personality and was obsessed with getting back at people he felt had wronged him. Hansen served less than 2 years behind bars, while his first marriage crumbled as his true nature surfaced. After his release, Hansen sought a fresh start far from his troubled past. In 1967, he and his second wife, Darla Henriksen, a devoted Christian and special education teacher, relocated to Anchorage, Alaska. There, he built the image of a quiet family man, running a bakery, raising 2 children, and earning respect as a skilled marksman and big game hunter. To his neighbors, he was the very picture of normalcy, calm, dependable, and unassuming. He appeared unremarkable, soft-spoken, reserved, almost forgettable. But behind Robert Hansen's timid smile lurked something far more sinister. The thrill of hunting animals had long faded. He now craved a different kind of prey, something human, something terrified. Under the cover of night, he stalked Anchorage's forgotten corners, places where the vulnerable slipped through society's cracks. Sex workers, exotic dancers, runaways, women whose disappearances would barely cause a ripple. Hansen studied their routines in silence, waiting, watching. When the moment was right, he approached with disarming charm, offering cash for photos or a quickie, luring them in with practiced ease. He seemed trustworthy, harmless even. The moment the door clicked shut, Hansen dropped the act. He reached beneath the seat, drew, and brandished his gun, and let the silence fill with terror. He drove them to his modest home in Muldoon, an ordinary house hiding unspeakable horror beneath its floors. In the cold, dim basement, he chained them like trophies, dehumanized and helpless. What followed was a prolonged ordeal of sexual violence and psychological torment. Time became a blur. What began as panic dissolved into quiet, suffocating surrender. And then, when their strength and spirit were nearly gone, he escalated the nightmare. Hansen loaded his victims onto a small bush plane and flew them deep into Alaska's remote wilderness. Vast, unforgiving landscapes where no one could hear them scream. There, he released them into the wild, stripped of clothing, stripped of hope, and told them to run. For a fleeting moment, they may have believed escape was possible. But to Hansen, that belief was part of the ritual. With a rifle in hand and the composure of a seasoned predator, he stalked them through the underbrush, methodical, patient, merciless. This wasn't just a murder. This was the hunt. He didn't just kill, he collected trophies of his cruelty. When police finally searched Robert Hansen's attic crawlspace, they uncovered a chilling cache: stolen jewelry, torn ID cards, and most haunting of all, an aviation map marked with 37 tiny red X's. Each mark pinpointed the final resting place of a victim. women he hunted and murdered across the vast, unforgiving Alaskan wilderness. Even now, some of those bodies remain lost, swallowed by the cold forest. Their stories unfinished, their families left shattered and without closure. Among his known victims was Celia Beth Van Zanten, an 18-year-old girl with dreams far bigger than Anchorage's shadows. She fought back fiercely and managed to escape Hansen's grasp, but the merciless Alaskan winter claimed her. Her frozen body was found a mile from the highway, alone in the snow. Her desperate struggle cut short by nature's unforgiving hand. Sherry Morrow, 23, was discovered buried near the Nick River. Her life ended by gunshot wounds to the back. Her disappearance left a wound in her community that never fully healed. Then there was Robin Pelkey, only 19, who vanished without a trace and remained anonymous for nearly 4 decades. Known only as Horseshoe Harriet because of where her body was found, Horseshoe Lake, her true identity was finally restored in 2021, thanks to advances in forensic genealogy and a DNA match. A haunting reminder of the decades-long wait for justice. Each victim was more than a red X on a map. They were daughters, sisters, friends. Young lives stolen, frozen in time, their voices longing to be heard. Each woman had a story, a family, a life. Yet for years, their fates were buried, both literally beneath the earth and figuratively beneath a society that barely noticed their absence. Hansen exploited that silence. His respectable facade shielded him from suspicion, allowing him to operate undetected, hunting in plain sight. And still, the darkest chapter of his story had yet to unfold. The turning point in the hunt for Robert Hansen didn't come from high-tech forensics or veteran detectives. It came from the raw courage of a 17-year-old girl. On the morning of June 13, 1983, Cindy Paulson accepted what seemed like a simple, if uneasy, proposition: $200 to accompany a man to his home. But the moment she stepped into Hansen's car, the facade crumbled. He pulled a gun, his calm mask slipping away, and drove her to a house in the quiet Muldoon neighborhood. There, in a cold, dim basement adorned with trophies of both hunted animals and stolen women, Paulson was chained by the neck to a heavy post. She endured hours of brutal assault, punctuated by an almost surreal moment when Hansen, indifferent, lay down on a nearby couch and took a nap. A chilling glimpse into the mind of a predator. When he finally woke, Hansen told her they were leaving for his remote cabin near the Nick River, reachable only by bush plane. At Merrill Field, with Paulson still cuffed, Hansen began loading supplies into the small aircraft. It was then that Paulson seized her chance. She crawled across the back seat, flung open the driver's door, and ran barefoot across the tarmac, leaving behind her blue sneakers like silent evidence of her terror. Hansen gave chase, but she reached 6th Avenue and flagged down a passing truck driver, Robert Yunt. Yunt drove her to the Mush Inn, where she begged the front desk clerk to call her boyfriend at the Big Timber Motel. Meanwhile, Yunt hurried to his job site and alerted the police, igniting a chain of events that would finally expose Hansen's monstrous secret. When officers arrived at the Mush Inn, Paulson had vanished. She had taken a cab to the Big Timber Motel. In room 110, they found her, shaken, bruised, but alive and still cuffed. Her detailed account was chilling. A basement lined with chains, mounted animal heads staring coldly, a peculiar rug stained with evidence, and a small plane parked at Merrill Field. Her sharp memory, forged in trauma, gave investigators their first real lead. But Hansen, when questioned, remained unnervingly calm. He denied everything, accusing Paulson of extortion. Supported by a friend's alibi and his unassuming reputation as a baker, he was initially dismissed as a suspect, a wolf hiding in plain sight. It would take the quiet tenacity of Alaska State Trooper Glenn Floth to start seeing the invisible threads others had missed. As he pored over cold case files from the previous decade, a chilling pattern emerged. Women vanishing from Anchorage's seedy underbelly. Most of them sex workers, exotic dancers, or runaways. Weeks, sometimes years, later, their decomposed remains would be discovered deep in the Alaskan wilderness. Bones scattered by wildlife, skulls fractured by bullets, identities reduced to dental records and jewelry. Floth knew this wasn't random, it was a ritual. But to crack the case, the team needed more than forensics. They needed to understand the mind behind the horror. That's when they turned to a rising discipline in law enforcement: criminal profiling. They called in John Douglas, one of the pioneers of the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit. Douglas examined the evidence, survivor accounts like Cindy Paulson's, autopsy reports, and locations of the discovered bodies. From that, he constructed a psychological profile with uncanny precision. Their suspect was likely an experienced hunter, methodical and patient. A man who struggled socially, possibly with a speech impediment. Someone who felt powerless in public, but craved total control in private. And crucially, someone who kept mementos from his victims to relive the thrill. It was as if the profile had been pulled straight from Robert Hansen's own shadow. Behind the scenes, the investigation was intensifying. Forensic pathologists carefully examined the recovered remains. Bones weathered by time, lives erased in silence. Most of the women had been executed with chilling consistency, a .223 caliber round, fired with precision. Ballistics testing traced the shell casings back to a specific weapon, Robert Hansen's Ruger Mini 14 rifle, a hunting rifle he legally owned. A weapon he'd used not for sport, but for slaughter. Investigators dug deeper. They cross-referenced aviation logs from Merrill Field with the estimated dates of each disappearance. The flight records lined up. Hansen had flown solo into the Alaskan bush, time and again, just days before women went missing. What once looked like a coincidence now pointed directly to premeditated murder. Cindy Paulson's testimony became a linchpin in the case. Her memory, sharpened by trauma, gave detectives something no map or log ever could: texture, detail, truth. The blue sneakers she'd left behind in Hansen's car weren't just a footnote, they were a breadcrumb. Physical proof of a story too harrowing to ignore. When a search warrant was finally executed, what Paulson had described matched with eerie accuracy. Chains, bolted to the basement post, animal heads staring blankly from blood-stained walls, and the same green carpet she had mentioned, down to the pattern. With each new thread, the noose tightened. Detectives placed Hansen under surveillance, tracking his every move. Piece by piece, they built a meticulous case, one grounded in forensics, aviation records, victim patterns, and the unshakable testimony of a teenage girl who had lived to tell the tale. The monster, who had hunted in silence, was about to be hunted himself. On October 27, 1983, a search warrant was executed on Robert Hansen's home vehicle and his private plane. What they uncovered chilled even the most seasoned investigators. Inside a hidden attic crawlspace, they found the Ruger Mini 14 rifle, ballistically matched to the bullets that tore through the backs of young women left in shallow graves. Beside it, jewelry, driver's licenses, makeup kits, and other small personal items. Trophies, memories he didn't earn, lives he destroyed, reduced to evidence in a dusty box. And then, the map. An aviation chart, marked with 37 tiny red X's. Some of those marks aligned with known crime scenes. Others pointed to untouched corners of the Alaskan wilderness, unmarked graves never recovered. Graves that may still lie hidden beneath snow and silence. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Hansen finally broke. But he didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He confessed in the same way he hunted, methodically, devoid of empathy. He described his victims as lesser, women who asked for it, as if their lives were disposable. As part of a plea deal, he led police to grave after grave. Some he had buried years ago. Some so remote even the birds didn't go there anymore. 17 confirmed victims. 12 bodies were recovered solely because of his map. But the rest? Still missing. Still waiting. In court, Hansen pleaded guilty to just 4 murders. Authorities believe the real number may be more than 30. Some say closer to 40. He was sentenced to 461 years without the possibility of parole, a symbolic number for crimes beyond comprehension. Hansen was imprisoned in Spring Creek Correctional Center, Seward, Alaska. In August 2014, at age 75, Robert Hansen died of natural causes behind bars. He took many secrets to his grave and left behind scars that still haven't healed. His crimes didn't just haunt Anchorage, they changed it. The forests, once seen as pure and untouched, became a graveyard. Mothers never got to bury their daughters. Fathers never got answers. And the system, slow, judgmental, and blind to the vulnerable, learned a hard lesson too late. Cindy Paulson, the girl who ran barefoot across an airstrip and changed the course of history, left Alaska long ago. But her courage became a beacon, proof that one voice, one survivor, can bring down a monster. Because monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear aprons, smile politely, shake your hand, sell you a cinnamon roll at 6 a.m., and sometimes they get away with it for years. But here's the thing. That map still has red X's we haven't found. That wilderness still keeps secrets. So ask yourself, what else is out there? And how many voices are still waiting to be heard? That's why we tell these stories. Not to sensationalize, but to remember. To give names back to numbers. To speak for those who can't. If this story moved you, help us keep the light shining. Like this video so it reaches more people. Share it, because silence is how predators thrive. Comment to honor the victims. Every name matters. Subscribe to Criminy Docs, where we don't look away. We dig deeper, we remember. Because sometimes the truth is buried, and we're here to unearth it.